Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200.
Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. This is Merle Hutchinson alongside of Linda Hutchinson for number 200.
Woo, yeah.
Today we are celebrating our 200th show.
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
That's
crazy. A lot of shows.
But I also have to kind of apologize because last week in our show, we kind of said next week, and we really meant 2 weeks from now. So if you listened to last week to our show on how we love and the unhealthy patterns, we're really glad you did. And if you didn't, please go back because I think it's a very important show. But we kind of promised that we were going to get to the healthy side. That's next week.
We just did a teaser.
Yeah.
We just did a teaser. So yeah, next week we will do the healthy side of the loving and relationships thing. So, but yeah, we wanted to take this week to say, you know what, we've been at this now for 200 shows.
It's crazy.
We will have completed 4 years in the first part of October. Remember the very first year we were on the actual radio.
Yeah, that's
Eagle
where
Radio.
Rock Solid Radio came from.
That's why you see the word radio. And so we were doing that for a local radio station, and that was really cool.
Every Sunday night.
Yeah, the deal was really most people listen to that by way of a pre-recorded thing, and we thought, well, that's pretty much what we call a podcast. And so we said, well, let's just do it as a podcast because it gives us a lot more freedom to do our thing. And that's where we started, and it gave us a chance. That was the first time that doing this show allows you and I to be teachers and not actually in the counseling crisis mode. So, and part of what we've talked about many times, as much as we enjoy and see the need to be in the immediate crisis mode, it is so much better to be on the preventative side.
Yeah.
And so that's why this show and Strong Dads, let's talk about these different topics, these struggles that couples and families have. But, if we can learn from the history and not try to repeat some of the negative, that would be a really pretty cool thing.
Yeah, so we asked you, our listeners, what would be some of the questions that you would want us to answer on our anniversary show? And so we're going to share with you a little bit later. But, hon, I got to ask you, looking back 200 shows, 4 years, which is crazy to me, what would be some of your favorite shows? You got a favorite stand out?
Without a doubt, when I sang, "Oh Lord, It's Hard to Be Humble," that was my favorite. Now,
oh my gosh!
That was.
If you didn't see that show, what number was that?
Let's see. I think I have it written down here somewhere. That was show 161, episode 161. And the reason why that one was funny is because I got more teasing out of that show. I don't even know exactly what the topic was. Obviously, it was something to do with being humble or not. But I've been teased a few times
and
about
the fact that
the voice.
I had never even heard that song before, and you were like, "You haven't heard that song?" And you just started. I was like,
just bring
what in the world is going on here?
Yeah,
this is not American Idol for sure.
How about you? What's your favorite show?
Well, if we're gonna get on the going out.
Wait, what did I do now?
No. I still think back last summer that we did our Toolbox series?
Yeah, we did the Toolbox series, which there was several. Which one got you?
When I played your mom, we did little skits to kind of
in the
introduce.
Car?
Yeah, and I threw a little temper
you were
tantrum.
A screaming maniac.
Actually, you were a little temper tantrum too, but then I lost control.
You brought it home, and when we recorded that, we did that literally out in our driveway, and we had to check to make sure the neighbors were not outside because you were bringing it. And I thought, oh my gosh!
I saw little veins popping out on the side of my head. It was ugly.
Yeah, that was fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thankfully that was just an act, I think.
Yeah, for me, another big one for me was our interview with John Roseman.
Yeah, that was a cool one. Yeah,
that was somebody that really has been a mentor to us in the coaching, counseling world, and really had a lot of wisdom in his books. Especially Parenting by the Book, which is one of ours that we use with our coaching. And so to have him on our show, trying to think which one that was, 181. That was powerful. It was kind of like full circle moment to actually have one of our mentors on and just for him to interact with us and answer a lot of questions.
I think the cool thing about having John Roseman on the show, whether you agree with him on all of the parenting issues or not, he was so approachable. I mean, we've had a number of guests, and I can't really think of a bad guest, but he was like very gracious, very thankful. He was very humble in the sense of like, well, I don't really know, and so sometimes when he comes off with answers like in his book, I think people feel like he's almost a dictator on how he says things ought to be, but he really is like, no, like this is what God's word says, he refers to the ultimate authority, but he himself is just very gracious. So yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah. Any others that stick out?
I think one of the things, and we've always known this, we've been in the counseling and coaching world, but when I scan through the different shows that we do, this is a question that I ask in just about every single, when I meet a person or a couple that comes in, and I ask this because the more I do what I do, I realize just how hard it is, and that is that we did a show with the question, "Are you still coachable?" Okay, and I said still because most people have some coachability in them when they're younger, like when they're little kids and they're playing ball or whatever. But coachability really means, are you changeable? And change is hard.
Hard.
Even in us,
especially the older you get.
Yeah, we've talked and we go through different things ourselves, and we go, why do we keep repeating these patterns? Like it's different struggles that we have, and you're like, coachability is it's very underrated in terms of what it really takes to change a marriage, to change an individual. To be able to listen and not just listen, but then implement. So. It's just, it's the real part of what we do.
Part of what we have been blessed with the last 4 years is some amazing sponsors. And, one of them has been with us.
What a good lead in. You just went right into that.
Seriously, since the very beginning, and that's Maxwell Construction. And so we just appreciate them as really supporters of what we're doing, the messaging that we're getting out since the very beginning. So that's 4 years that they have really come and walked alongside Rock Solid Families and Rock Solid Radio. So we appreciate and thank them.
Yeah. Casey's Outdoor Solutions has also been there almost from the get-go. They've been with us for a very long time, and Casey and his crew have just been very supportive of our messaging. So we want to thank both Casey and Maxwell for supporting our messaging and just helping us get the message out that families and community are important.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this in the month of September, we are also launching our Families Rock parenting program, parenting series, which is a free set of workshops. You can attend one or all. Somebody just asked me recently if there's still room, and there is, because we're in the East Central High School Performing Arts Center, which is an amazing facility with plenty of space, very comfortable space. So everyone is welcome. No advance registration is required. There is childcare available, potty trained and older. So if it's an older kiddo, we would love to have them. The FCCLA has just been so gracious about partnering with us and providing that childcare from their student leaders. And so we're going to be partnering with them. And so we just really encourage you to come and be a part of that. It's the Wednesday nights in September of 2022, if you're listening to this in our archives. And it's from 7 to 8:30 at East Central High School Performing Arts in St. Leon, Indiana.
Yeah, we can't wait to get that started and have been been getting a lot of good conversation about that. So,
and the first one off the bat is a really big one that was actually one of our first shows, and that is Who's the Boss? And you're going to be leading that and really sharing about seasons of parenting and authority and how do you establish that in a healthy way. That's really the first show.
Definitely one of our favorite topics to get started on, because it starts if you don't get this first part right, everything else that you try to do in parenting seems to be a bigger challenge than maybe it needs to be. So it's a good start for us.
Yeah.
All right. So go check out our website. I better just say that. Check out our website, rocksolidfamilies.org. You can see all the blogs that are written, all the past shows. We're talking about various shows that we have talked about. Do a search over those shows and just type in a topic, and you'll get all kinds of different things.
Teens,
different
marriage,
hits.
Divorce, parenting,
and if there's any way that we can reach, or you can, you need some help or questions, whatever, just reach out to us.
Yeah.
Okay, our phone number is 812-576-7625.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm gonna fire a question at you. We'll take turns, because.
Okay. All right. Do I have time to prep? I would prep anyway.
So here's a question from a listener and maybe even a client, I'm not sure. But my spouse and I are not equally yoked in the marriage. What should I do? Done. Nothing like handing you a softball for that. So, and for some people, they don't understand equally yoked. So different faith, maybe one is a believer, one is not. Maybe you're different faiths. Maybe, anyway, so that's where this question, I think, is coming from.
Yeah. So equally yoked. It is in faith. That's how it's usually referenced, but it then can branch out into so many other things. And so another word that we use often is, are you unified? Or do you have unity between the two of you? Okay. And so, the scriptures are very clear about it. Like, it is very heavily encouraged to be equally yoked, because even in a equally yoked marriage, you're still going to have struggles, because you are individual persons, and trying to just deal with your own personality trait with your spouse is going to be a challenge. But the purpose in being equally yoked is it creates an equal foundation for where you're going to go get authority. Okay. Like, well, I have my opinion, you have your opinion, but what is God's word? And so if we do not have the equal authority that we go to, then it gets to be a power struggle between the two of you. And that can be really dangerous and nasty, whether we're parenting, whether we're buying houses, whether we're going to talk about schooling, all of these things. Then we start to think we are the authority. Well, I know better. And so the idea here, when we talk about equally yoked in our authority, like, where does our authority come from? And of course, we talk about our Christian faith being grounded in that. So, so the thing here is, well, what if we're not equally yoked? Well, you don't make people become equally yoked. Okay. It has to be from the heart. It's just like you can't make someone be in love with you. You can't make someone love Jesus. It's not one of those things. It has to be a choice. Okay. But it also has to be attractive.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, it has to be attractive, and if you are trying to beat your philosophies and theories and even religion into this person, then that's not very attractive. And I will personally even say, like, the harder somebody beats on me, the more my heels dig in. Just for the sake of, like, being stubborn myself.
Good point.
And so, if I really want to be equally yoked, and I feel like I am yoked and I am connected to Christ, I'm connected to His Word, then how about let's just show them that through our actions, and not through the righteousness of the law, but through the righteousness of serving and loving and showing grace. In other words, just being a really beautiful person, because that's so much more attractive when you give that person very little to not like about you, okay? And you're not doing that for the sake of sort of schmoozing them. Right. You're doing this because that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Good
being
point.
equally yoked is, I think, extremely important with all of the other things things that you guys have to take care of.
Yeah.
Let's just say we struggle. Maybe we're stubborn, or we are saying, you know what, you can believe in your God thing. I'm just not going to go there. Maybe I'm going to be agnostic or even atheist or whatever. Then at the bare minimum, you be equally yoked in how you're going to run the house. In other words, what are the values of the house? Okay. What are the rules? What are the expectations? Well, how are we going to carry them out? Then what are going to be the consequences, and what are the rewards? Like, at the very least, then we find common ground in at least those areas.
Good point. And, you make a great point. You're not going to convince somebody by beating them over the head. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to repel them away further, push them away further. And so what I would recommend as well, on top of that, those are all amazing answers, would be to live it. Be authentically living it, because there's a lot of people walking around that say they believe in God or that they're a Christian, and their words and their actions are not matching. They're very hypocritical. And the last thing your spouse or a friend is going to want is whatever you're putting out, because it's so fake and it's so, diametrically opposed to what you say you believe. And so I would say be authentic and real in your faith, and that you pursue that relationship with Christ with full abandon, and that you are all in and you're not sitting on the fence, and you sometimes say you're a Christian, but then you sometimes don't go to church, or you sometimes, lie and cuss and all those things that look very ugly if you're saying you're a follower of Jesus Christ. So be real and authentic and live it out loud, but in a respectful, loving way to a person that maybe doesn't agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing, like, if I don't know whether to believe somebody or not, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for contradictions in them. Do they really believe what they're saying? But I also, though, want to say, hon, like, none of us are going to get it perfectly right.
No.
And so being over the top and almost coming off phony and not real, that also is a turnoff to people.
Yeah. So there's some humility in there, right? And so when I say authenticity, that when you blow it, you're going to apologize. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to say you're perfect, pretend like you are, but you're going to acknowledge, like, that's not who I want to be. That wasn't what I wanted to show you, but I did. I blew it.
Yeah. Good question. All right. Now it's my turn.
Okay.
It's my turn. So this question comes because we have been getting a lot of these types of scenarios, and I don't know what percentage, but a lot. This happens a lot, and the idea here is, what is the role of a grandparent when it comes to weighing in on the parenting of the grandkids, their grandkids? I can think of my grandparents, and they were really very hands-off with parenting. Now, in my situation, we had lots of cousins, so I don't ever remember being parented by my grandparents. Now, your family situation was a little bit different, but what is the role of the grandparent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there's a lot of grandparents out there who are raising their grandchildren.
Yeah.
And they're put in a parenting role, whether it be because of addiction or incarceration or divorce. And either a parent is living with their parents, so the grandparent is in the home, but maybe the parent is there. But sometimes the parent isn't even there. And so your role does shift, and it is getting very blurry about, like, okay, well then who's the enforcer? Who's the rule, the authority in the home? And so that's something you got to really first establish. Like, is mom and dad involved in the parenting process? Are they in a healthy place, or are they in a active addiction? And so you got to really determine what your place is. And if it's truly a grandparenting position where mom and dad are around and they are parenting, then your role is to back off, because your role is to love them as a grandparent and not parent them as a mom or dad.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, when I think of this, the ones that I see get most confused about this are the grandparents, because you can tell their heart is to be a grandparent. That's what their heart is. Like, if they all of a sudden have to come in because the parent is incarcerated or addicted to drugs or whatever, like, the grandparent's brain usually doesn't switch to parent. It usually is like, well, I'm the grandparent, and but I have to take care of you. But they still want to act like the grandparent.
Right.
And so the hardest part here is they have to go, oh, I guess I'm in the parenting role now.
Right.
Which now that totally flips how you can operate.
Yeah.
All right. And your boundaries, your how you actually are going to carry this out on a day to day, all these things you have to totally switch.
Now, what gets really blurry is when mom and dad are active and they're healthy, but they're using grandparents for babysitting.
Yeah.
And so day in and day out, mom and dad drop off the children to a grandparent, and then they don't want the grandparent to parent. It's like, I still have to discipline when they're misbehaving because they're in my care and mom and dad aren't around. And so what is my place? I think that's a conversation you have to have. Like, what is acceptable discipline? Maybe they're not allowed to spank. Maybe you're not allowed to put them in timeout. Like, you're going to have to determine as a parent and be very clear about what's okay for grandma and grandpa to do and what's not. But here's the deal. If they're in grandma and grandpa's home and you're not there, they're not allowed to just swing from the chandeliers, and do whatever they want. And grandparents can't discipline because that's not fair.
Right.
If every day they're coming over to grandma's house, but they're not allowed to step in. So that makes it very fuzzy. And I think that sometimes it's better off not to even go down that road.
Yeah, I mean,
It does make it confusing for the kids.
Yeah. The perfect scenario is to let grandparents be grandparents and parents be parents. But when it does get fuzzy, then getting the plan of actually how we're going to implement this is necessary. So the conversation has to happen.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. You ready for your next question?
I guess.
All right. What do I do if I want to seek help for the relationship, but my spouse is not interested?
Man,
We've had that a lot.
This is a daily occurrence. Well, as we talked about a little bit ago with being equally yoked, you can't force somebody to come in to counseling or coaching. It has to be, because all change takes place from within. We tell people all the time, we're not going to change you. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be you that sort of internalizes whatever it is that we're trying to work on, and you make decisions. Yes, this is finally a good idea. I believe it, or I want to do it, or not, or whatever. And so if you recognize that you would like to see help, you would like to seek help, then by all means, go get help, okay? And again, this is another thing that you don't beat it over the head of your spouse, but again, be attractive about it. Hey, you know what? I'm recognizing that I am struggling, that I'm not always doing the right thing. I'm making mistakes here. I'd like to go seek some help, maybe get some counsel. I would love for you to come too, so that the two of us could work and hear the same thing. That is so important whenever we're talking about relationships. I tell people flat out, if you're actually asking me to work on your relationship, your marriage, then I want the both of you there, if at all possible, because I want you both to hear the same thing. Right. And this is a system of working together. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
But the problem is, and the question is, they won't come. And so that's when I just had this recently where that person came to see me, and then we talked and really worked on their part in this.
Right.
And then they went home to their spouse and they admitted their part and what they're learning and how they want to learn to be better, and that it would take and be helpful if both of them were together. And that feels a little different than, hey, come with me so I can throrow you under the bus.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. You're making it attractive.
Right, exactly.
You're kind of falling on the sword before you're putting the sword in them. And that's how we would try to invite that person in. All right.
Yeah.
Let's just say at the end of the day, though, that they say, sorry, not interested. Okay. I mean, that's a real difficult time for you to actually then think about, okay, so what does this really mean for me?
Yeah.
And then I would go down that direction that you started with, Hun, is the idea of, okay, then you still come in and let's work on you, right? Are you healthy? Are you doing what you need to do? How can you be the best version of you? And work on you. And if you're going to stay in that relationship, then let's see if we can help give you the tools to stay in that relationship and hopefully do it better. And if maybe that relationship's not going to work, okay?
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that relationship doesn't really exist anymore in a healthy way, then how do we even move through that? So I would still say, if you want to get help, then you go get help, all right, and try to be attractive in terms of bringing your spouse in.
Yeah. When I was in the seminary, I had a professor who talked about how do you know when it's hopeless, right? Like, how do you know? And only God knows. And so he'd use the example of a plant, which I totally could relate to because I've killed more plants in our home than anything. And he says, you stop watering it, you stop giving it sunlight, and it just starts to die. And some people might say it's a dead plant and they throw it away. But then I've actually had this where I had a dead plant in my office and I gave it to our secretary and I said, here, it's a big, beautiful planter and it costs a lot of money, but it's dying. And so she's like, I'll take care of it. And so she pruned it and she transplanted, replanted it, and she fertilized it. And then when I came back into the office, it was like this big, beautiful, and I'm like, wow, there was life left in that plant. But to me, it was dead and it was about ready to go in the garbage can. And so you never know the life that's left in your marriage. Only God knows. And so you want to make sure you've done everything you can to bring back that to life, whether it be watering and giving it light and fertilizing it, and then allow God to do what he does best. So I would never say never until someone else says, I'm done.
I'm going to go on a total tangent.
What?
You never know what a plant is going to do.
A what?
A plant.
I thought you said planet. A plant? What do you mean?
We did our landscaping this past year. I just had to share
You're
this.
really going to bring this up.
Totally,
this isn't in the notes.
Totally off subject, but this is just where my brain went on this. So here, I bought all these plants for landscaping and kind of had an image in my mind for how it would all be laid out and bigger plants in the background, smaller plants in the front.
Not so much.
And so I bought these little flowers, and they were supposed to get 8 to 10 inches tall. I'm like, okay. And then I bought these little pumps of grass, okay? Ornamental grass.
Yeah.
And it said on the pot, it said 8 to 12 inches. And I'm like, that is going to be perfect. They're going to balance right out with those flowers. I put those in at the beginning of July, okay? They are now 4 feet tall, covering up the entire front of the house. You can't see anything else. So these plants...
They're not little pumps.
...are growing like crazy, okay? And so the landscaping looks stupid right now. And I've got to replant that whole front part. But it goes to show you never know how a plant's going to grow if you take care of it.
I was not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, no. I'm driving up every day as I'm watching it get to 2 feet tall. I'm like, what happened to my 8 to 12 inches? These things are looking like a jungle.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. But it just, you took me down that road.
But, it is true. Don't call something hopeless. Allow the Lord to do what he does best. And so
he knows how to grow grass, that's for sure.
Does.
Yeah.
Even when it's supposed to be little puffs.
Yeah, I wanted some pumps, some grass pumps.
All right. Okay. Is it my turn or your turn?
It's my turn to ask you.
Okay.
What do you...
How many do we have time for? One more? Two more?
Yeah, well, I don't care. We can do we can do one more piece.
Okay.
Okay. All right. How about this? What do you do when you recognize a negative pattern or cycle in your marriage? Okay, now in your mind, you've seen it's like, oh, I've seen this show before. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you do when you recognize that?
Wow.
And I said the negative, right?
Yeah.
I mean, positive, fine.
Negative patterns. Well, we've been dealing with this personally and trying to figure out where those patterns come from. And I think that's where sometimes outside help could help, where a different perspective, because sometimes we lose focus and perspective of why do we do what we do? And we just kind of see the outside chaos or the outside collateral damage that we create, when really if we drill down, there's a deeper root of that pattern that you gotta get to. And so I really highly recommend that you get some outside help and that you really say, this is what I do. This is how I feel, and I don't know why. And so if there's someone that's trained in that, they can really help you identify some core patterns. Really, hun, that's where How We Love has come from, the show we did last week on those negative patterns that we literally saw growing up, and we drug that baggage into our marriage. And so we do what we do, and we don't really realize that it comes from just years ago when you were seeing that as a child.
Yeah, part of his personality, part of it is default behavior patterns that because maybe at some level they worked for you, and then you practiced them and they became almost natural, and then and that's okay if it's a positive one, but if it's a negative one, and then you know every 2 months or 3 months you're like, why am I back here again? Okay, and we see it everything from overeating, gambling, addictions. And even in temper and all of these different things, you see these cycles. And I think the very first part, and it's the hard part, because sometimes you even can see the cycle, but you know how hard it is to actually call it what it is. And then, well, what am I going to do to practice the change? This goes back to the coachability thing. Like, am I coachable to this? Because I have to set all new practices into place. Like, how do I catch myself when I'm starting in on that pattern? How do I take criticism for it? And man, those are not easy.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got one more. And so I'm jumping down to forgiveness versus trust. So this was a question just recently from a client, like, how do I forgive? And does that mean I have to trust them? And so what's the difference? I threw that one in there.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Because I hear
forgive
it a lot.
I'll forgive you. Well, you have to really understand, we've talked about this before in other shows, you have to understand what forgiveness or lack of is really about, okay? Forgiveness is the idea that you've been hurt, but you're hurt so bad, you're desiring bad things and you have bad thoughts about that person. You upset me so bad, and then I think, well, I hope something bad happens to you, and that's why we have jail sentences, right? Payback, right? And we have to pay the sin, or we desire that they show some repentance back, okay? And penance is the word sometimes used. And so it's really a natural thing in us that if somebody does us wrong, we want to see them pay for it, okay? And so the idea is, when you want somebody to pay for it, well, what would it mean if somebody forgave your debt? And so forgiving somebody means you're no longer asking them to pay for it at the level that, in other words, that you want to make sure they carry out. It doesn't mean they shouldn't pay for it. It means you're not going to live to see, or you don't desire to see them pay for it, okay? And the reason for that, we often talk about, forgiveness as being that idea of, I need to forgive you whether you like it or not, because the hate that's living in me is destroying me. The idea that every time I see you, I get angry, I get upset, whatever it is, that's not healthy for me.
Right.
Okay. So forgiveness is just as much of a personal endeavor for yourself as it is for the person who may or may not be seeking it.
Right. And it's a command. God doesn't really give us an option. He's saying, you forgive. I'm going to forgive you at the level that you forgive others. And so he's like, really, unforgiveness isn't an option. And so he's saying, you want to follow me? You want to be a believer in me? Then do what I do, and that's forgiveness. And so that's where we've got to really be intentional about that, for, like you said, for our mental health, for our spiritual health, because it's like poison. Unforgiveness is poison that you're drinking and waiting for the other person to die. That's the unforgiveness in us, and it eats us up from the inside out. But, hun, and this is where it's important differentiation, does that mean you trust him again?
Yeah, and so trust is a totally different avenue. So trust is the idea of, okay, am I willing to have relationship with them again at the level that I did before? And trust, that's a totally different animal, okay? And so I always use the example of, like, if I'm in a business deal with somebody, and I'm in a business deal with someone, and they basically rip me off out of $50,000, okay? And so I'm hurt, and so we get angry at each other, and we say, we're done. And then so for the next 2 months, I'm wishing bad on them because they've hurt me and they've taken my money and all of that. And so I am so angry, but I need to work on forgiving them. Okay, I need to work on forgiving them because I can't even see straight. But then time takes place. And then I start to see, you know what, like they have been showing me a totally different behavior. I'm actually seeing that they're maybe not as bad a person as I thought. And I'm starting to build trust back, okay? Because I'm watching their actions, not their words. I'm watching their actions. And so when trust starts to be built back, then you talk about the level of relationship that you can get back into, okay? But certainly just because you forgave them doesn't mean, listen, if you rip me off of $50,000 and I see that your behavior is not really changing, there's no inclination of change, then I don't need to trust you, and I don't need to feel guilty about not trusting you. In fact, it's the blessing there is I'm like, no, I still have no reason to trust you, okay? But I'm no longer owning the problems that come from that.
And that's really what happens in the case of divorce a lot, is that there's been a break of trust and someone's been very hurt, maybe betrayed, maybe there's been infidelity, adultery, pornography. And so that person is harboring so much resentment and anger and unforgiveness, and it's just eating them up. And then they finally say, okay, I'm going to forgive them, but do I want to be married to them? Maybe not. Do I want to, am I going to trust them with other relationship situations? Maybe not, but that you have let go of that, really, that seeking revenge, right? Seeking that, knowing that God will take care of the rest. Like God is a just God. And so whether it's here on this earth or somewhere else, that he is the one that we let put that into his hands, not ours.
Yeah, good.
So,
All right. I'm going to ask you one last question.
What? That's not fair. We were going to do one more.
You're going to get one last question.
Uh-oh.
Because you asked me the first question, it would only be fair if you had an equal number.
Okay.
My 5-year-old son wants to dress up in girls' clothes and dresses and run around the house. What should I do?
That's a great question, and that's happening.
That's why I threw that one on you.
Thanks a lot. Threw me a softball. Part of what we're seeing is a huge overreaction to some natural things that are happening, whether it be that girls are playing with dolls or boys are playing with trucks, or girls are, guys are, put on a dress or whatever. And so we got to be really, really careful that we don't overreact and kind of send them in a spin of like, why was that such, disturbing to them? So we really kind of want to play down, especially at that age, at age 5, that we are not making a huge deal of that, but that we direct them into healthy habits that we want to see. Okay. So I don't want to condemn a child. I don't want to be harsh and, especially start to think that something's happening at age 5. I think that we just create an environment where we're loving, we're affirming what we want to see things, but not condemning things that could disturb us because of what we're seeing in our culture today.
Yeah.
But we want to surround them with healthy people, healthy messages, God-honoring relationships, so that they will, because sometimes it might be an 11, 12-year-old, and then that's a little more concerning to parents and grandparents, like, maybe something is happening here. And so that's where the conversation happens of, what's going on and that kind of stuff. But I still would not make a huge deal out of it to really kind of alert, like, is something wrong with me?
Right.
What would you say?
I would be right with you on that. I mean, let your kids be kids. Sometimes they're silly. Sometimes they're funny and they're goofy. I think, you have to remember that you are your kid's hero. And so the words that come out of your mouth are either going to build them up or it's going to tear them down. And so, that 5-year-old is just a kid. And so I don't want to encourage, but I don't need to discourage either in the negative. Like, don't you ever dress up like that again? Okay. And so I really just need to say, he's a kid. A kid is a kid.
Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned, like 11 and 12 and 13 years old, and now we're starting to get a whole different developmental picture in their mind of what that actually might be saying. And again, I think, this is where our faith in Christianity and how God designed us and built us as men and women, that's when you can start to really have those conversations. Like, this is, what's God's word say about the type of person we should be? And what if I have a boy, I'll just stick with the boy for the sake of our conversation, a boy who is just a more sensitive boy, right? I mean, we have some boys who are out just throwing rocks and kicking trees, and okay, that's fine. But you have boys who are just more sensitive. Women love a sensitive man who knows how to listen and talk, because they can understand emotional intelligence like at a crazy level. Okay. Right. And so that's something that's a really great trait, to be able to say, hey, you know what? You're really good at listening. You might be a great teacher. You might be a great counselor. You might be something along that line. And it doesn't have to mean that you go into the feminine side of dressing the part and the gender confusion. So, as a parent, you have a responsibility to then help your kid make a responsible decision, honoring God.
Yeah. So, for instance, we have 4 boys, 1 girl. And so one of our older children, sons, was dressed up by some friends, at age 5 or 6 in a little tutu and a little thing. And like, I think I have a picture of it. I'm not freaking out. Like you said, I'm not condemning him and take that off right now, that kind of stuff. But if he's a 12-year-old young boy who says, Mom, I want you to buy me some dresses, you're right. We're having a different conversation.
Right.
And we're not encouraging things that go against God and his word. And we are having this conversation about where that's coming from and why he wants those and what we're going to do in our home. And so that's the kind of stuff that it does depend on age, but the overreaction is what's really driving our kids further and further away and into the messaging that's out there that says, well, my mom and dad are a hater. These people love me and accept me. I'm going there.
Right.
We don't want to drive them into the arms of these lies that are really taking those kids on the fringe, feeling left out or rejected or judged. And they're literally just scooping up and saying, come, it's kind of like, remember, there was a movie, it was a Disney movie, where there was a little guy who was selling candy, and he was like, come here, little girl. And he was like, and he trapped him. I can't remember the name of this movie.
I don't know.
And trapped him in. And I think of that kidnapping of being lured in by the enemy. And so we don't want to push our kids into that area where they're really going to be susceptible to that.
Let me just say that I'll take this part of this answer, how we might go about this, all the way back to the very first question about being equally yoked.
Yeah.
So this type of question is exactly why we believe it is so important in our work to be connected to the Word of God, because the world could spin so many different options that seem to even make sense, right?
Sound
like, well,
good.
You're more sensitive, or more inviting, and all these things. And so at the end of the day, we are God's creation. We did not create him. And I think this helps us in our coaching to say, okay, wait, take a deep breath. How does this work within God's nature?
Yeah.
And it does, like we said, you can still have a very sensitive boy, that has those character qualities and those traits, but he can still be a very masculine man in terms of how he would raise his own family someday or be in a marriage. So just be careful of what are you using as your foundation for how you're going to make those decisions.
Yeah. So it's our 200th show. We're so glad that you tuned in in our anniversary special. And again, like we mentioned at the top of the show, we're really going to be getting into how we love the healthy way next week. So please, in the meantime, listen to last week's show if you haven't already. We're really going to be kind of a part 2ing it. And we really want you to hear the unhealthy part that we know is very concerning. And a lot of times the way we were raised, what we saw growing up. So we want to really try to combat that with healthy.
All right, so we also want to close out by thanking our sponsors, Maxwell Construction and Casey's Outdoor Solutions. We want to thank those guys. We also want to thank all of you out there listening for sharing our shows. Please continue with 5-star ratings. Again, those are not a plea as much as this is how you work the search engines. Yeah. And so we need your help to just say, hey, if you like these kind of messages and you want this type of dialogue going on, then please help promote it by just ratcheting us up on the search engine.
Do you think you got another 200 shows in you?
Oh, without a problem. Without a problem. This is the fun part. This is the teaching part. You know, this is the part that hopefully, and we've created a bit of a library.
Yeah, quite a bit.
With 200 shows that we find ourselves directing people to. And, you know, I mean, I just think it's something to draw from. Even when we're sleeping, we can have shows out there.
Yeah, not all of them are on YouTube. You know, we've done, I think, 2.5 years maybe on YouTube.
Well, yeah.
The first year or so, year and a half were just on our podcast platform. But you can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can find all of our shows on our website at rocksolidfamilies.org, or you can see a multitude of our episodes on YouTube starting in, I think, January of maybe 2020, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'd have to go back and check that.
So,
but
yeah.
All right, so Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day. I'm losing it.
Thanks for listening to Rock Solid Radio. You still didn't finish the whole sentence.
All right, so thanks for listening to Rock Solid Radio, making a stronger or building a stronger.
Did we thank our sponsors?
I did. I already did this. Okay, we're going to finish this out. All right.
Okay.
All right, so thanks for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time.
Make it a great day. You did it.
Boom.
Three's try.
Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana.